Welcome to part 5 of the graduation of Jake Moon, everyone. Thanks for stopping back to hear more of this story by Barbara Park, a great author. In part 4, we were introduced to a new character, Mrs. Alma Russell. She's a nurse that was hired to help take care of Skelly once the previous registered nurse, Lana, quit. That was a big thing that was Jake's fault, because he didn't go home like he was supposed to. He's been having a lot of issues dealing with the things that he's missing at school. He is not handling Skelly's Alzheimer well at all. He's so worried about being embarrassed in front of other people. He's just really struggling right now, and things haven't really gotten much better. Now, he did mention that scene at the very beginning when the boys were making fun of his grandfather at the dumpster and Jake didn't do anything to stop them. We found out that it was Mrs. Russell that came to help eventually. The janitor that saw Skelly out there called the number on his medical alert ID bracelet. Mrs. Russell came to help. Meanwhile, Jake kind of hung back and didn't do a thing. And when we left off from part 4, there had been the incident at the restaurant. Jake ended up walking home after talking with Mrs. Russell in the school parking lot for a bit, and he's just not doing well. 8th grade graduation was 3 weeks away. I can't really say I was getting in the spirit of it, though. When you haven't felt like you're part of the class for a while, the thought of graduating and moving on doesn't really choke you up all that much. Still, that doesn't mean there weren't good things about it, because there definitely were. The best thing was how some of my teachers had already eased up on the homework and stuff. I mean, there are certain teachers who just get it, you know? They understand that kids' brains go on vacation the first week in May, and no matter how hard you knock, there won't be anyone home until September. Take my English teacher, Mr. Bork, for instance. I had an oral book report due on May 19th, but since my brain was already on vacation, I just couldn't get myself motivated. So on the day it was due, I told Mr. Bork that something kind of serious had come up at home, and I wasn't quite ready to give the report. Mr. Bork, who was grading papers at the time, didn't even look up from his desk. "Haven't read the book yet, have you, Mr. Moon?" he asked. I shook my head. Not a word. For some reason, that made him smile, and he told me, "1 more week." Seriously, the guy was so understanding, I should have asked if we could just call the whole thing off. The thing is, I'm not a big fan of the oral book report. In my opinion, an oral book report doesn't benefit society in any way. The class hates listening to it just as much as you hate giving it. Trust me, if anyone in your class ever looks amused while you're giving an oral book report, it's probably because your zipper is down. Anyhow, since Bork gave me an extra week, I put it off again for 3 more days before I even thought about it. Finally, though, on Sunday, I dug the book out of my backpack and started to read. The Pearl by John Steinbeck. It was a nice title, I thought. Oyster story is what I was thinking. But even if it was boring, it was only 118 pages, so how could I go wrong? I'll tell you how I could go wrong, by reading it. The Pearl started out depressing and went downhill from there. I began reading at noon and didn't finish till after 6. Yeah, I could have read it faster, but every couple of chapters I had to stop and throw it across the room. To put it mildly, The Pearl is a book without hope. Something good happens in the beginning, and then right away everything starts going wrong. And it keeps going wronger and wronger until you don't even want to turn the page hardly, because you know how much wronger it's still going to get. And here's what I hated most of all. I identified with it so close you wouldn't believe. Because for me, that's exactly how Skelly's Alzheimer's has felt. From the first day he found out he had it, everything in our life has gone steadily downhill. And no matter how hard I try, all I can see in front of us are more sad pages. But still, I have to admit, every single time I threw the Pearl across the room, I always went over and picked it up again. I guess something inside of me just needed to know that in a story, even a story as miserable as this one, things could end up okay. Maybe not rip-roaringly happy, but okay. And so I read it all the way to the end. And a baby got shot. I swear, I'm not making that up. That's how John Steinbeck ended his book. You call that creative writing? Does it really take a lot of imagination to end a story by killing a baby, do you think? A few minutes after I threw the book across the room for the last time, I heard Aunt Margaret and James come in the front door. I looked at my clock and saw it was 6:30. Time for Sunday dinner together. I groaned. Not James, not now. Eating dinner with James has become one of the most dreaded parts of my week. James may be older than me, but he has no morals or scruples, not even one. which is not to say that I'm overflowing with scruples myself, but no matter how low I go, James goes even low. Like a couple of months ago, we were eating, and he asked me to pass him a roll. And so just to be nice, I warmed it up under my armpit for a few seconds, which even now makes me bust out laughing. Except right away, James responded by licking his thumb and sticking it in the middle of my mashed potatoes. He said he was constructing a holding pond for my gravy. And keep in mind the kid is in high school, okay? But that's just how childish he still is. And unsanitary. Anyhow, because of Skelly's condition, family night dinner is almost always at our house. Aunt Margaret and Ma take turns fixing the food. When it's my mother's turn, she cooks a roast or a chicken. When it's Aunt Margaret's turn, she carries in 2 bags of Chinese food and plops them on the table. If my aunt ever wrote a cookbook, I'm pretty sure it would be called Order Out. "Jake, dinner, come on, let's go," Ma shouted. "Chinese tonight." I didn't want to go. I was already in a terrible mood, and watching James cram his mouth full of sweet and sour pork would make me suicidal. Ma waited a couple of minutes, then came to get me. "Hey you, didn't you hear me calling? Everyone's at the table waiting for you. The food's getting cold. Let's go." "I can't, Ma. I just need to finish this book report. I'll eat later, okay? Just this once, please?" The pearl was lying on the floor near the door. My mother stared down at it. "What? It fell off the bed." "And did what? Flew across the room?" "Maybe. It's a light book." She picked it up. The pearl. I think I read this in high school, but I can't remember the story. "Oh, believe me, Ma. If you ever read The Pearl, you wouldn't have forgotten the story. It's about this poor fisherman who finds a pearl the size of a baseball, and so he and his wife are totally happy for about a page and a half. And then all this terrible stuff starts to happen to him, and at the end, their baby gets shot. It's a real rib tickler." My mother tossed it on the bed. "Then what you need is to get away from it for a while. Come on, Jake. It's family night. You can come back and finish your report right after dinner. You won't even have to help me with the dishes. I promise." She took my hand and pulled me off the bed. As she dragged me into the dining room, Aunt Margaret blew me a kiss from the table. I just kind of waved half-heartedly. James never even looked up from his plate. A couple cartons of food were stuffed in his mouth already. I patted his shoulder as I sat down next to him. "Oh, thanks for waiting, James. Really, though, you should have started without me." James just kept eating like I was invisible. Across from me, Skelly had started eating too. The corners of his mouth had already collected bits of egg roll, and there were 2 pieces of rice stuck to his chin. Even though Aunt Margaret was sitting right next to him, she didn't even make a move to clean his face. If I'd been in a better mood, I probably would have just reached over and flicked them off with my finger. Instead, though, I got up deliberately slow, walked all around the table, and dabbed at his mouth with my napkin. Aunt Margaret looked all embarrassed. "Oh, I'm sorry, Jake. I could have done that." I didn't say that's okay or anything, just walked back to my seat. Meanwhile, James had still not raised his head. He was hunkered over his dinner like he was protecting it from an alien invasion or something. As soon as I sat down again, Aunt Margaret started acting all friendly and chatty. "So, Jake, you were back there doing homework, huh?" I just nodded. "Yup." "What kind of homework?" "Book report." "Oh, on what?" "A book." Ma kicked me under the table. "It's called The Pearl," I said. "The Pearl," she repeated. "Didn't you read that one last year, James? It seems to me you read that one." "I doubt it. It's not a sticker book," I said. Without even moving his head, James rolled his eyes to the side to look at me. Under his breath, he called me a foul name. I gasped in pretend shock. I said loudly. "Did anyone hear that? James called me a naughty word at family night dinner." Ma threw her head back in frustration. "Please, could we please just finish our food in peace for once? Would that be okay with you guys? Could you just put a lid on it for the rest of the meal?" James just shrugged and went back to his plate. He must have been especially hungry, or he never would have given up that easily. As usual, the minute he and Aunt Margaret finished eating, they got Skelly up from the table and headed for the door. As soon as dinner is over, they always whisk him outside for their weekly stroll around the block. Aunt Margaret calls it their quality time together. I call it Aunt Margaret's totally lame excuse to get out of doing the dishes. It's a miracle how she always gets back just as Ma is starting the dishwasher. The part I love best, though, is how my aunt wraps up the evening each week. When she comes back in the door after their walk and she puts Skelly in his recliner and goes straight to her purse. Then she pulls out her big fat checkbook and writes Ma a check for Mrs. Russell's salary. She always waves the check around in the air after she fills it out too, like she's helping the ink dry. Then she takes the check over to my mother and presents it to her like she's one of those guys from the prize patrol. $500, she announces, as if from week to week Ma forgets what Mrs. Russell's salary is. And then after that, everyone hugs. Except me and James. And then poof, my aunt and my cousin are back in their car driving across town where they are magically transformed into normal, regular people with no sad old man to take care of. On this particular night, I stood at the door watching Aunt Margaret's lights disappear down the street. From the living room, I could hear Skelly clapping along with the contestants on Wheel of Fortune. He can't solve the puzzles anymore, but he's totally into the clapping. I glanced in at him and started back down the hall. My mother was sitting on the couch and she shot me an annoyed look. You could have done better at dinner. I stopped. What? What did I do? She got up from the couch and met me in the doorway. You know perfectly well what you did, Jake. It wasn't enough that you had to make a huge production out of wiping Skelly's face. Oh, no. Then you had to throw in all those smart alecky remarks about the book report. I was just kidding around, Ma. No, you weren't. You know you weren't. Family night is supposed to be about all of us spending time together with Skelly. But lately it's been nothing but a battle of insults between you and James, and I'm telling you right now, it has got to stop. Good. Fine. Let's stop it then. If you want me in a better mood, stop having James and Aunt Margaret over to dinner every Sunday. And please, Ma, don't tell me one more time about how family night is supposed to be about Skelly. I know that perfectly well, okay? But in case you haven't noticed, Aunt Margaret can't even stand to touch him. What kind of great family do you call that? My voice got louder. And oh yeah, you could talk all you want about me wiping that rice off his face, but you know Aunt Margaret saw it, Ma. She just didn't want to get her hands dirty by touching him. Skelly could be sitting there with a cream pie on his head and Aunt Margaret wouldn't lift a finger. That's not true, said my mother. Margaret is just as concerned about taking care of your grandfather. At that moment, something inside of me just exploded. No, she's not, Mother. She's not one bit concerned about taking care of him. She's concerned that other people take care of him, namely you and me. Why can't you see that? She eats with him once a week to make herself feel better. Then she writes us a big la-di-da check and she and James go back to their la-di-da wonderful life. Ma threw her hands in the air. So what do you suggest I do, huh? You want me to shuffle the poor old man back and forth between our houses so his disease will punish us all equally? The money Margaret gives us is important, Jake. The money is huge. Without your aunt's money, Skelly would be in a nursing home somewhere. And in case you've forgotten, this is his home. He deserves to live here as long as he can. She ran her fingers through her hair. Good Lord, Jake, you above everyone else should know how much we owe him. Oh, I know, Ma. And I covered my ears. I know. I've heard this part 1 billion times. We owe him, we owe him, we owe him. My throat burned from trying not to cry. I'm doing the best I can right now, okay? I'm trying. But gosh, Mother, I'm 14 years old and I'm caregiver to an old man who thinks I'm Claude Harper. Suddenly, Skelly stood up and started tugging on his slacks. Ma saw him from the doorway and ran in. She grabbed his hand and hurried him to the bathroom. I waved to make sure everything was okay, then started to my bedroom again. Ma passed me in the hall and reached for my hand. Look, I don't want to fight with you, Jake. I just want to have a peaceful meal on Sunday. I'm not the enemy here. You and I are in this together, and no one understands how god-awful hard Skelly's disease has been on you better than I do. Her voice cracked a little. I carry the guilt of that with me every single day. And if being bitter and resentful would make your life happier, I swear, I'd tell you to go for it. But believe me, Jake, staying bitter is only going to make you more miserable. She paused then, and I know she was hoping I'd hug her or something. I couldn't, though. Instead, I took my hand away. More miserable than this, Ma? My life being more miserable than this is pretty hard to imagine. I stepped around her and kept on walking. The rest of the week wasn't great. On Wednesday morning, I was already awake when I heard the alarm go off in Ma's bedroom. A few minutes later, she called to me from across the hall. Jake, you up yet? I rolled over and looked at the calendar on my desk. It was May 26th, the day my book report was due. English was 5th period, and I still hadn't completely finished my notes on the Pearl. It's against Mr. Bork's rules to read your book report from a piece of paper, but at least he lets you use note cards. Ma opened my door. Come on, you. Get up. It's 6:30 already. I yawned and got out of bed. The daily routine had begun again. Every morning while my mother takes her shower, I get Skelly out of bed and point him to the bathroom. After he's done, I help him wash his hands and face, and then we head back to his room to get ready for the real fun, trying to get him dressed. These days, my grandfather's wardrobe is mostly t-shirts and pants with elastic waistbands, so normally it goes pretty fast. But on this particular morning, his easy clothes were all in the hamper, so Ma had laid out a shirt with buttons and regular pants with a zipper. I took a few deep breaths to get myself ready. All right, Skel, let's give it a shot. He sat down on his bed and we maneuvered his feet into his pant legs. Then he stood again so I could pull them up. But before they were all the way to his waist, he was already pulling up the zipper. Nah, Skel, wait, if you zip up too soon, you always get your boxers jammed in a big... He gave a hard tug, and as I looked down, "Oh, wad," I added quietly. This time the boxers were stuck so tight the zipper wouldn't move in either direction. While I worked to get it free, Skelly started fastening his shirt. Takes him forever to do a button these days, and even when he's successful, it's almost always in the wrong spot. When I finally got everything unstuck and buttoned, he was sitting on the edge of the bed again, ready for his shoes and socks. Just for the record, my grandfather will only wear red socks. If you put any other color socks on him, for some reason he takes them off during the day and puts them in the kitchen sink. After I helped him into his shoes, he leaned over and fastened the Velcro. I gave him a thumbs up. Hey, excellent job with the Velcro this morning, Skel. It was already later than usual, so I hurried him out to the kitchen. Skelly and I have been eating breakfast together every morning since I was a baby. Our roles are totally reversed now with me helping him, but still, I consider it a tradition. He sat down at the table and I poured his orange juice. He drank some while I got his Cheerios. It's been his favorite cereal for almost a year. He likes trying to sink the O's with his spoon. As soon as I put the bowl in front of him, he asked the same question he always asks. What's this? Cheerios. They're Cheerios, Skel. You like 'em. I poured his milk. He tried to sink 'em with his spoon. They float, he said. Yeah, they do. He took a bite. I nodded and ate a couple bites of my own cereal. By then, Skelly was staring down into his bowl again. What's this? Cheerios, Skel. They're Cheerios. They float? Yep, they do. Last year when he first started this routine, I thought he was just being lazy. I thought he wasn't even trying to remember. So when he asked what they were for the 5th time, I totally lost it. Cheerios, Skelly. Now don't ask me that one more time, and I mean it. Nobody's brain can be that fried, not even yours. I grabbed his bowl away from him. I know you can remember the name of this cereal, Skel. I'm positive you can. Just tell me the name, and I'll give it right back. He just sat there. I'm not kidding around, Skelly. You're not getting this back until you tell me the name. Now think, okay? What did I say it was? What? What? My grandfather's eyes started to well up. Oh, no, Skelly, please don't cry. I'm sorry, okay? I quickly put the bowl back in front of him. Look, see, here's your cereal back. Cheerios, Skelly. Its name is Cheerios. I dried his eyes with his napkin and hugged him as tight as I could. Morning, bud! Skelly had just started his cereal when Mrs. Russell came rushing through the front door. She has her own key to our house, so she always comes in without knocking. Since August, she's caught me in my underwear 4 times. And all 4 times she started singing that I See London, I See France song. I looked at the clock. It was a little before 7. Usually Mrs. Russell doesn't come till after I'm gone. What's going on? Why are you so early this morning? She came over and gave Skelly's arm a pat. Because me and your sweet grandpop here have a date for the pancake breakfast at the senior center, she said. Then, in a flash, she snatched his cereal bowl right out from under his nose. Oops, can't be eating cereal this morning, Skelly fella. We gotta save room for those delicious blueberry flapjacks. I waited for Skelly to start pitching a fit about his missing Cheerios, but Mrs. Russell had him up and out of the chair before he even realized they were gone. I left the 2 of them together in the kitchen and went to take my shower. 15 minutes later, I was turning off the water when I heard the front door shut. I took my towel and wiped a circle in the foggy bathroom window. Through the steam, I watched Mrs. Russell take hold of Skelly's hand and trot him across the street. When they got to the other side, she knelt down and pulled up his red socks. He leaned his hand on her shoulder for support. Before she stood back up, she smoothed his pant leg nice and neat. Then she held his hand again and gave it another pat, and they went on down the block. Ma banged on the bathroom door. "Hurry up, Jake. It's 7:15. You're going to be late." I swear, my mother announces the time more often than Big Ben. I don't know why she won't get off my back about being late. In 9 years of school, I've never been late even one time. As usual, I got to school in plenty of time before the bell. Unfortunately, though, I still didn't have my notes done for my book report. So at noon, I had to skip lunch and go to the library. The notes finally got done, but my stomach didn't get fed, and by the time the bell rang for fifth period, it was growling so loud, I swear it was echoing off the lockers in the hall. I stopped at the water fountain and drank all I could, but when I finally sat down at my desk in English, the growling had gotten even louder. I started to panic. It's not like this book report wasn't already stressful enough without adding body noises into the mix, you know what I mean? To try to muffle the sound, I bent in half and pretended to be searching through my backpack on the floor. I was still down there when Mr. Bork began taking roll. He couldn't see me and called my name. "Mr. Moon?" I was seriously considering just not answering and staying down there, when a noise suddenly exploded from the hall. Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. A fire drill. It was a fire drill. I was saved by the bell. Literally saved by the bell. I'm never that lucky. Never, ever, ever. And as it turned out, that wasn't the end of my good luck either, because there was a huge traffic jam in the hall, and it took an extra long time for all the classes to get out of the building. Plus, once we were out there, Mr. Bork and Mr. Tracher, the science teacher, got so involved in a conversation that even after we came back in, they kept talking in the doorway for at least another 10 minutes. So as amazing as this sounds, when Bork finally got back to his desk and he looked at the clock, he told me he was sorry, but there were other things he needed to get to, and there wouldn't be time for my book report. "Is it okay if we try again next week sometime, Mr. Moon?" he asked. I lowered my head in this hangdog look I do sometimes. "Yeah, well, I guess so." Seriously, I should be an actor. Academy Awards have been given out for performances worse than that one. At the end of the day, I came out of school feeling euphoric. Euphoric was a vocab word this year. According to the dictionary, it means feeling great happiness. But what euphoric really means is that if no one was watching, you would skip home. As I started up my street, I honestly thought my day couldn't get any better. But when I raised my head and saw a cop car parked in front of our neighbors, the Waxmans, my mouth fell all the way open. I'd always suspected the cops had come for Mr. Waxman one day, but for it to happen on the day of my book report miracle, well, that was almost more luck than any one kid deserved. I sped up. There was no way I was going to miss this. You can tell just by looking at Mr. Waxman that he's on the shady side of the law. For one thing, he wears a hat. Not like a baseball cap, like an old man's hat with a brim and everything. And not only that, but he's got one of those creepy thin mustaches that looks like he draws it on with a pencil, which is a crime in and of itself if you ask me. But what really makes Mr. Waxman suspicious is the way he never opens the door all the way when I knock. Even when I'm standing there holding a package that got delivered to our house by mistake, Mr. Waxman will only open the door wide enough to peek one eye out. Then, in a move so fast it's like a blur, he reaches out, snatches the box out of my hands, and shuts the door right in my face. A second later, the door opens another crack and he says, "Thank you," which I'm pretty sure is supposed to be "thank you." I hurried even more. I was hoping I hadn't missed the part where they put him in the back of the squad car and hold his head down so he won't bump it. "Oops, watch the old hat there, Mr. W," I was going to say. I laughed out loud. In fact, just to show you what a good mood I was in, even when I got close enough to realize the cop car was in front of my house and not the Waxman's, it still didn't register that anything was actually wrong. I walked inside. The cop was standing in the kitchen. Ma and Mrs. Russell were sitting at the table looking through the pages of our photo albums. Weird, I thought. Why would a cop want to look at our old family pictures? My mother glanced up. "Oh, Jake," she said absent-mindedly. Then her eyes went right back to the album. "Ma?" All of a sudden, she pointed at one of the pictures. "Here, this is the one I was telling you about. Look, see? It's a close-up, just like I said. It was taken this past December." She pulled it out of the plastic and handed it to him. I was seriously starting not to like this. "Mother?" Just then, Ma's hand went over her mouth as if she were seeing me for the first time. Oh God, Jake, I'm sorry. You don't know yet. It's your grandfather. And I'm sure you're not going to like that I'm stopping there, but that is where we're going to pause for part 5. I'm sure you're going to scramble on over to click on part 6 as quickly as you can once that's uploaded. But for now, we don't know what happened. They're looking for pictures. Something's happened with Skelly, but she hasn't told them what it is yet. You'll have to come back and listen to part 6 to have that revealed. Enjoy part 6 when it comes up. Until then, you'll just have to wait to see what happens.